Wait a few seconds so it doesn't cut off the intro. Hello everyone and welcome back to Superboy Beyond, and we have a special guest today, and if you're a fan of this channel, he needs no introduction. Rocketed from a distant planet to a bold new destiny on Earth, found by a Kansas family, raised as Clark Kent, learned he possessed the strength of steel, the speed of light, and the desire to help all mankind. He is Gerard Christopher, everyone.
Hey guys.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Hey, thank you, and I'm sorry I'm late today. I wish we had somebody saying that intro with your accent. That'd be fun. I would have been given it a new.
I quite like the guy that did the original intro. I wish I knew who he actually was.
No, I don't. I don't have a clue. I'm sure that could be tracked down though.
Yeah, I'm sure it can. Should we just get straight into this? Shall we?
Sure.
I'm just going to open up with just a very simple thing. I know that obviously the whole show was shot in Florida. What was that heat like in that costume? Because there's been rumors, that you were literally being followed around by people with electric fans. How much of that is actually?
It was pretty brutal. It's true. No, it's true. Florida is known for being hot and humid. So the suit, because that's not real, but that one is. And it's very thick. It's very thick spandex, and my cape was wool. So this thing was not, really made for a place like Florida.
Very humid.
So I used to stay in the trailer as much as I could when we were outdoors. And, I had a thermometer that showed me the outside temperature. And I used to cringe sometimes knowing that I had to go out when it was like, 95 degrees Fahrenheit and really like very high humidity, like 95% humidity. So I just used to mentally prepare myself for it and try to just literally stay calm, because the character's not allowed to sweat. You can't see like sweat on the guy. He's not supposed to, it's not a thing he does.
Yeah, we don't want a sequence like that test footage with Christopher Reeve.
Yeah, that original screen test with Christopher Reeve, the dark stains under his arms. It's very noticeable.
Oh my God. Well, you can imagine how bad that would look, right? So it was a combination of just staying calm and them having fans. They used to, when we were outdoors, always, if I couldn't go to my trailer, they'd have a fan and I would like just be against the fan, like on top of it like this. So just keeping it cool as much as I could and dealing with the elements,
I mean, that must have been pretty much a first in terms of just the style of costume. But it's so important that he wears that suit in almost every episode. It's not necessary every time.
Yeah, but this is like almost exactly Christopher Reeve's suit. I think down to like details, it's the same. And I actually wore some of Chris Reeve's suits for flying. I remember I wore his capes, I think.
The symbol on the cape didn't change until I think it was season 4.
And the guys that flew me were British guys who flew him in the UK.
Wow.
They were a wild bunch, man. They were really funny.
Yeah, they actually those guys, they were pretty close to where I grew up. They were basically the local celebrities, the guys that made Christopher Reeve fly. So,
Do you still know them?
I never knew them in the first place, but it was one of those things.
You never met them, or you never met them?
No, unfortunately not. But it was one of those things where every now and then they'd be in the local papers, giving interviews about it. Usually around an anniversary year.
Yeah.
So going back to just your career before Superboy. You obviously were in the movie Tomboy with Betsy Russell.
Oh my God,
How was it when she came over to Superboy for an episode? How was
nice.
that reunion?
That was really nice. It was really unexpected. And
you didn't have anything to do with her casting?
No, I didn't at all. Oh,
wow.
Not at all. Ilya was the one that was really responsible for bringing back all these nostalgic actors too. Like, we had, I don't know if you know who Ron Ely is. He just passed away. Like,
Tarzan himself.
So all these like older actors that were like well known. Ilya was really responsible for bringing those guys on, which was really a good thing.
Yeah.
And they were fun. They were fun. But Betsy, it was just, it was nice that she was on there because it was somebody I knew and it was comfortable. Um, it was just nice. It was nice to have her back.
Must have been especially nice considering, obviously you came into season 2. There's a load of people around that you perhaps hadn't worked with before. It must have been great to see a friendly face for
Yeah,
an
I mean,
episode.
like for instance, who was it that played Laura, Mrs. Kent?
Salome Jens?
No. In one of the episodes, we had a couple that, oh my God.
Oh, the
Forgetting her
fake
name.
Jero and Lara?
Yes.
Britt Eklund.
Britt Eklund, because I knew Britt Eklund. So that was fun when Britt showed up. And then I got I got to know her her co-star there. What was his name? George Lazenby. George Lazenby was the funniest guy you've ever met in your life. And he could say things that only he could say and get away with. I mean, his jokes were like beyond like stuff that anybody could get away with. But he was able to just lay them out there and people would die laughing and just say, oh my God, this guy's crazy. But he was so fun to work with. And it was really nice to be with her too, because I knew her from, I just knew her socially from when I was like, oh my God, a young guy. I met her when I was like 20, 21 years old. And then I was working with her on the show when I was, that was about 8 or 9 years later. It was fun.
Would you say that she's one of your favorite guest stars across the
I
show?
really
Because
like
there
her.
are a lot of good ones.
I really like her. Yeah. I mean, there was one girl that I really liked. I don't know if I should tell that story, but and one of my favorites was Ron Ely, the guy who just passed. I mean, he was truly a really, really wonderful guy and very insightful. He gave me advice about, just the business and work and stuff. And he was just really great.
Yeah,
But there
we
was,
were big fans of Ron Ely's performance there. He, you don't doubt for a second on screen that he's an older, retired Superman. Like, he just owns it from the moment he appears.
yeah. There's that scene where I'm like walking next to him and stuff, and we're like looking at each other. And this guy was about 4 inches taller than me, so I had to be on a quarter apple box, because this guy was big dude, and
Wow. I would
really
never
good.
have even expected that was something you don't think about stuff like that, do you? With
Yeah. So they had to set up some apple boxes. So he's walking and I'm walking. You don't see our feet. You see us like in a 2T or something like that shot, walking across, panning, and it looks like we're all kind of we're both the same size.
Gotta love just the little tricks of the trade, I guess.
Uh-huh.
We'll continue with some of the guest stars. How was it working with Sherman Howard as the new Lex Luthor? Because
Oh, he
we're
really
big fans.
he amped it up a lot because he had very big energy, and it was, he had the fun job, to be perfectly honest. Playing a bad guy is the fun job. When you have to be the good guy, you're so limited in terms of what you can do, what you can say. And when you're a bad guy, the sky's the limit. So that's why I loved so much when we did the episode called Body Swap, where I went into his body and he went into mine, and I was able to just have a great time because I was Lex Luthor for that episode, and it was just a great time because you're unlimited in terms of what you can do. You can have fun, and that was what he did all the time, and he was really good, and he was great playing off of. Played a good bad guy.
You kind of got to do the same kind of thing with playing the Sovereign, where you were the evil Superboy.
Oh yeah, he was great. I loved the Sovereign, and I loved the character from when I did the episode called Roads Not Taken, and there was a guy in a different dimension or whatever, and he killed Lex Luthor. He used his heat vision and cut him in half. And I thought, oh man, that would be so great. Wouldn't that be fun? One of the things I used to talk to Ilya about, and the other producers, was you know, if somebody like a Superman character really existed in the world, what would they be doing, right? Would they be helping old ladies across the street? Probably not that much. Would they be getting involved like today? Would they get involved in the war in the Ukraine? Probably, yeah. Would he do that? Would he get involved in like, you know, disputes like worldwide disputes? I think, yeah, I think he'd be like keeping the peace. So within the, you know, the constraints that we had, which were a very small budget to work with, I thought it would be great if we could just try to put him on that kind of global stage a little bit. That's why when I wrote one called Wish for Armageddon, I kind of gave him like an international, he was getting involved in the international scene, not just like the local scene, which
Mm.
is kind of what you'd imagine would happen if there was really a character like that, right?
Yeah, it's a similar sort of similar direction that Christopher Reeve wanted to take Superman. I mean,
Exactly.
say what you
Exactly.
like about Superman 4, you know, it's not the best movie in the world, but it had some bloody good ideas. You
Right.
know, it's the kind of thing that is worth another shot.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so
No, I agree.
yeah,
I agree.
it's definitely one of those things. I mean, like you say, he probably wouldn't be helping old ladies across the street that much, unless he's flying over and he just happens to see one. You know,
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you see an airliner falling out of the sky, that's something you're going to do, right? You know,
That takes priority.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Stuff like that. So, I mean, you know, you have to, back in the day when we were shooting this 89, 90, 91, you know, the technology was just so much more limited than it is now. I mean, literally they can do apps, as you know, they can do absolutely anything now. So, and make it look perfect. So if you can write it, you can shoot it, you know,
Yeah.
because you're not limited by anything. The technology can do anything now. So it's kind of a really different game now.
Mm.
It's a good time to be Superman.
Absolutely. And, you know,
Good time to
Superman's
be a
getting
new
a lot.
Superman.
Absolutely. And, you know, Superman is getting a little bit more popularity at the moment.
Uh-huh.
You know, there's like an animated series, there's a live action TV series, Superman and Lois, which is just ending now.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's there's the new movie coming. It's a pretty good time to be a Superman fan.
Right.
And Superboy itself seems to be getting a little bit more respect, just purely because, I mean, there was the show Titans, and Kevin Kiner did the music for that, and he brought back his Superboy theme to use for the new Superboy, which was just really cool.
Really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Like, it's a reorchestration of it, but it's the same tune, which I think is a really cool touch.
Yeah,
Now
And
and
that show
that's
that you're talking about, is that like that's not live action though, right?
that
nope,
is live action, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, although the Superboy in that show is a clone where he's sort of, I think he's half Superboy, half Lex Luthor. So yeah, he's a slightly darker version. So yeah, it's pretty cool that Kevin Kiner returned to do that theme. And Superman and Lois has had 2 different references now to Eckworth Industries, which is from your
Right.
very first episode.
Right. Right.
So that's pretty cool. We
It
didn't
means
get anything
it
like
means
that
they
for a
did
while.
their homework and they
Yeah,
looked
fingers
around.
crossed. It means there's still some Superboy fans at Warner Brothers.
Yeah, but you know what really shocked me is, like, you know, if they're looking at our show, because Lois and Clark, there were so many shows that kind of took stuff from our shows.
Mm.
Why didn't they ever like bring me in as a guest star on their shows? I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, a few years ago they did Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was this big thing where it was like Roads Not Taken, but it was like a bunch of
Right.
different versions of superheroes, and there
Right.
were multiple Supermen in that,
Right.
including one where Superman was just dead. You know, could they not have brought you in for one of those?
Yeah.
No?
I played dead pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you literally have to show up, put on the suit,
I
and
mean,
just lay there.
I could have been, you know, just eating something, playing dead.
Yeah, you know. I honestly don't know why Superboy's not getting a little bit more love. I mean, you know, Superboy, he didn't even really get much in the way of merchandising, did he? I mean, you had the tie-in
No,
comics.
you know, that wasn't a thing back then. And I
Yeah.
think part of what helped it too was, you know, Ilya Salkin, for as much as I like him, he had some issues that were tough. I mean, the show was, I don't know exactly how everything worked, but the show was co-owned by between him and Warner Brothers, I believe. And he could never agree to anything because he always wanted like the sky high pie in the sky kind of deal. And he always wanted control. And, you know, when you're dealing with a company like Warner Brothers, they're going to say, no,
Yeah.
you know, we're the big guys here and we're going to do it. And Ilya was probably not real amenable to doing a lot of things, you know, with them. And I don't know, or I don't have any knowledge of them like trying to do anything. But, you know, I also think back then, you know, were there that many merchandise deals? Like, were there many with Chris Reeves movies? I don't remember.
I
You
mean,
know,
he
when
had
the movies
trading
were
cards.
made, I'm sure afterward there were a ton. But when the
Oh yeah.
movies were made, were there many merchandising things? I don't know.
I
I don't think
think,
there was much. There was
yeah,
like,
I
there
think
were
around the
lunchboxes
time
and
of
trading cards, but
yeah, I think around the time of the first film, Mego was doing those 12-inch figures that had the likenesses of Terrence Stamp, Chris Reeve,
Right.
um, Marlon
yeah, there wasn't
Brando,
much.
but there really wasn't that much other than the trading cards and maybe some sticker albums here and there. We haven't really gotten any Christopher Reeves merchandising, quote unquote, until the last few years. McFarlane is supposed to be doing a figure of him within the next few months.
That'd be interesting to see. Still
Yeah,
no Superboy
it took
figures
the
though.
owners a long time to think about merchandising and say, hey, this is a whole nother revenue stream we have here. Let's do this. And, you know, I don't think they were thinking about it then. I wish I thought of it. But no, people weren't thinking about it back then.
I mean,
Yeah, the only one who
all
was
he
thinking
really
about
had.
merchandising like that was George Lucas with Star
Yeah,
Wars.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he made an
Well,
absolute
you know
fortune,
what
didn't he?
else helps everything is the internet. As soon as the internet exploded, which was after us, that's when these shows got so much of an afterlife because they live forever on the internet, and there's all the discourse on the internet about the show. Like I mean, look what you've got now. You've got all these platforms to talk about shows. You've got Instagram, you've got Facebook, you've got TikTok, you've got all this stuff where the millions of viewers can be online talking to each other, and it just expands the universe. And unfortunately, that's what my show suffered from, is that we didn't have that. So
Yeah,
the shows, as they progressed through time, I think all became more popular because of, you know, uh, the internet made them more mainstream and just, you know, just really put them on steroids. You know, just their fan base was on steroids. It kept people involved and engaged, and I mean, you look at just by how many followers these guys have online, right? It's
yeah,
like a show, because my show was, you know, number 10 in, in syndication. We had like 4 million people 4 million households watching it a week. So, you know, there's 3 people in a household. So that's 12 million people. I mean, potentially, if those people were all on the internet today and the show was on today, like it was fresh and new, you capture a lot of that. That's why these guys now have 1 million followers. They have 2 million followers. They have, you know, I don't even know how many million followers they have. They might have many more than that. But that's why all of these shows now are just going to get more and more popular and become such a big part of the culture than they even were then. You know, more
yeah.
accepted by everybody.
Yeah, it probably doesn't help that Superboy didn't have an official release until much, much later as well. I mean, I know you were selling DVDs on your website for a while.
Yeah, it was all this again. It was all that stuff with Ilya and not cooperating with Warner Brothers, and the two of them not working it out. And then they, you know, I think they smelled the coffee. You know, our show was doing really well at the end when I finished my last episode, and we were hoping that it was going to go another year and just continue because we were doing really well.
Mm,
But they pulled the plug, and I think there are several reasons why they pulled the plug. I can speculate that they didn't want to be dealing with the people that were running the show anymore.
mm,
And they also wanted to do Lois and Clark, which was going to be their thing.
yeah.
And
I think the timing of Lois and Clark is a big factor, isn't it,
yeah,
really? It's the fact that as soon as one show ended, another one was on.
right.
And I know that, you auditioned for that and got pretty far. Like, I'm sure everybody's heard the story, but if you wouldn't mind telling it again, like,
It was just
I think
that,
it's
you know,
interesting.
I went in to read and I asked the casting director, I said, can you please not, because she brought me in and then said, you know, I'm going to bring you into producers for this. And I said, great. And I just asked her, I said, can you do me a favor? Can you not like announce who I am? Just make it like, I'm just one of the people that you're seeing. And if these people don't know who I am, just leave it like that. And just let me audition and see if I get it again. And she did that, to her credit. I mean, she actually listened to me. I thought it was cool. So I went in and I read just like everybody else. And in the room, all these producers just said, we got it. We got our guy. This is it. Da, da, da. They start getting on the phones and all this other stuff. And there's excitement, and they kept me there, and they're talking, and I'm thinking, wow, this is cool. I booked another one. And I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for them to call my agent and all this other stuff. Then finally, one of the producers, I don't know his name. He was kind of the head guy. So he comes up closer to me and he sits next to me and he looks at me and he goes, so who are you, man? And he's excited to talk to me, and he picks up my resume and he starts reading and he goes, you've done this. And he throws my resume on the table. And he like puts his hands up in the air and he's like telling the people, he's done this. We can't have this. And he just like had this little fit that I was doing this. Now, if I knew then what I know now about how the business works, I would have just sat in that chair and I would have talked to him and I would have said, yo, buddy, listen up. My show was on for this many years. We did so many episodes. We have this many million followers. My show ended with me transitioning from Superboy to Superman. I said, what a great lead in for your show to just take that character and let him run with this show. And you're going to start with 4 million viewers and you're going to go to the sky's the limit, right?
Yeah. You'd
And
think that's
I
how
would
it
have fought
works.
for that. And today, people do that. I mean, I can tell you, I know big Hollywood stars that I've seen in restaurants, sitting at a table with producers and literally begging them for jobs. That was not necessarily my personality, but I would say back, if I could relive that audition process, I would have, and I don't know if it would have changed anything, but I would have fought for it. I should have fought for it.
And there's more reasons as well. I mean, your version of the character was the first live action version of anything in DC to even introduce the concept of a multiverse. So even if they didn't want to keep themselves to the canon of Superboy, you could easily just say, well, I've been to other Earths with other Supermen that look just like me, so maybe it's just one of them,
Well, that's big thinking. I don't know if I was a big thinker like that.
I doubt the producer would have known what a multiverse was back then.
Right.
Let's face it, Lois and Clark was designed to be a romantic comedy first and foremost, wasn't it? So
that would have been fun. I mean, I would have loved that.
Yeah.
It would have been fun.
It would have been cool to see you with Terry
Hatcher. Yeah. That would have been great. Wow.
If Superboy
wouldn't have complained there.
No, definitely not. If Superboy had continued into a 5th season, do you think, would you have had to transition straight into Superman, or do you think they would have postponed that for another year?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what they would have done. I mean, keeping the name of the show, or they maybe would have done a different kind of intro to the show, or I don't know, but because we definitely made it pretty clear that he became Superman at the end of the show.
Oh yeah. Like, it's clear as day. That whole final episode is just the moment before he changes his name. And I always saw the name change as something that happens once he reaches Metropolis. I always figure Lois Lane she's probably got a hand in the name change. But that's just my own personal theories.
Right.
But I'm just going back to Superboy now. How was it working with the late great Michael Callan as Metallo? Because Super Menace is so much fun to watch you two like being bad together. I
felt bad. The first day I worked on the show was with him, and they put us both in costume. It's like outside, big heat, and Michael had all that stuff on, and he was dying of the sweat, and he was like, he was not liking that we had to do like multiple takes of scenes and stuff, and I just felt really bad for him, and I was just trying my best. I was like kind of working on my character, and it was new to me, and but it was fun. And he and I became really good friends, and we were friends after the show for a long time. And I don't live in Los Angeles now, but he was in LA all that time, and I think he passed about like 2 years ago, maybe now. But he was a good guy. I knew him for a long time, and he was very fun to work with. He was a fun guy. He was a good actor, a really good actor, and played a good
He
bad
just had,
guy.
yeah, he just had this presence, didn't he, on screen? Like
Yeah.
it was just, you could tell that he was having fun with it. So hearing
Yes.
that he wasn't
Yes.
having fun with the costume, like
Yes.
I guess it just goes to show like how good an actor he was, because you can't tell that he's uncomfortable with the costume.
No, he had fun. You nailed it. He was just having a good time. And what a good guy. What a really good guy. I don't know if
Do
you
you
ever
want
saw
to
the
ask?
movie Cat Ballou that he was in.
I haven't seen that.
I haven't
Sure.
either.
You should stream that, Cat Ballou.
I'll look
Really
for it.
good.
Another fan favorite. Oh, I'm not going to call this one a villain because he's not. He's very misunderstood. But Bizarro.
Uh-huh.
How
Yeah, I'm
was it
really
working with
sorry that
Douglas?
he's not here today.
That's
He
all right.
had some personal stuff that got in his way. He lives like a drive from me, like 4 hours or something. And I see him occasionally and we talk a lot. He was great to work with.
I always
Yeah.
think, as hard as it must have been for you wearing that costume, at least you didn't have all of that plastered all over your face as well.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
That must
Yeah.
have been a nightmare.
He had it much worse. He was, but he developed a really good relationship with the guy who did all that makeup. They became really good friends. And I think it was a really great experience for him. And it was really fun for him to do that. He used to, before he got the show, he used to have this character called Mr. Silver. And he was like this kind of robotic character that he did really well, like amazingly well. And I think that all helped him with auditioning for Superboy, and he nailed it. It was really fun working with him too.
Yeah, I've heard there's stories that the two
stuff.
of you would be like up on the rig, in between takes, and you'd be floating there saying, "So what are you doing for dinner tonight?"
Yeah. I mean, we just had a good old time together. We spent a lot of time together when he was working there.
Just so many great guest stars on this show. I will ask this though. I know that in TV and film, sometimes actors have to drop out last minute and they're replaced with different actors. Was there ever a guest star in an episode of Superboy that you remember having to drop out?
Not
Do you
that I
remember
remember.
maybe?
No, not
Okay,
that I
that's
remember.
fine. It's just one of those things that we've always wondered. Let's move on to the episode Micro Boy, which I doubt you've got much of a specific memory about this, but if
I
you
have a
don't
little
mind
bit.
talking.
I have a little bit. I remember the guy. I don't remember the actor's name. I remember
Frank
the director.
Military.
I remember who directed it. I remember his costume, and
Yeah.
I
It's
know.
hard
I
to
remember
forget
the
that
actor
costume.
was a friend of the director, and it was fun. It was a different kind of episode, kind of different.
Yeah, the main question that we have about that is more general across the entire show, but we've a theory that there's a scene that was deleted from that episode because
Oh.
it almost feels like it jumps from one part of the story to the next, and it feels like there should have been something in between.
Huh.
Do you remember any episodes having deleted scenes? And
Wow, not personally, but I don't have my scripts anymore. Otherwise, I would check and see if it was like a revision that was made. I would say, it's entirely possible. It's
it might just be a
possible.
plot hole.
It could have been like that there was a real suit malfunction or something, because he had a costume too. There could have been, just something like that they didn't notice when they were shooting, like in background or something that, didn't work. And then they didn't want to go back and shoot it. I don't know. I mean, it's possible. It's stuff like that can happen for sure. And when you're
I
shooting
know
a show like we were doing so quickly and on a budget, it's not like they're probably going to go back and say, yeah, let's spend another day and go to this location and do that, because we didn't have the time.
Yeah, I mean, television in general was very fast paced, and I know that Salkine Productions, that's one of the reasons they had such a great working relationship with Richard Lester, is because he could deliver on time and on budget. So I know that was very important to them.
Right.
So yeah, I always assumed that perhaps that was an issue with Superboy.
Yeah, we had, most of our directors were pretty good. We had one director, I won't tell you who he is, but he was like a real shooter of film, and he just eat it up. Some directors are really good at, knowing exactly how they're going to cut this thing in their head. and they can see, okay, we did the master, we got the 2-shot, we got this shot, and they go. So when you do something and it works, they can say, okay, let's move on. But if a guy's not, and we didn't have any women directors, unfortunately, but when these guys were doing this, it, I don't know, it was sometimes like a little bit, showed like an insecurity almost, that they don't feel that they kind of nailed everything, so they overshoot it. And that was an experience with one director. And the directors that I considered the more talented ones were the ones that were like bing, 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 bing. They know exactly what they want. They cut. And then when they get something good, they just cut, boom, you move on. Occasionally I would say, hey, do you mind if I do one more for me? And they let you do that. But, film, the cost of the film was a consideration. The budget was a consideration. I think, a show like that, we had a big crew. They always used to break down the cost of the show. I think it was like $1,000 per minute or something like that. So anything you do like that just costs money. So, and that's an issue. So if I ask them to redo like one scene, if it took 5 minutes to do that, where they have to say, get everybody settled down, get sound ready, do the scene, that could cost several $1,000s just because I asked them to. So
it's got to be so much easier for them now. Everything's shot digitally. If the take doesn't work, I'll just erase that file or rewind the tape a little bit. It's so much easier now.
Yeah,
I really
dealing with film. Some people
then.
love the idea of real film, the graininess, all that stuff. But I mean, when you're shooting, they shoot something, they have to check the gate, right? You have to check the gate of the camera and make sure that there's like they used to, say like a hair in the gate or something like that. Something that's gonna like show, remember in some old films you'd see like you see a defect where it looks like there's literally a hair over the frame, and it stays there. So all of that stuff, checking for that, loading the camera, all is time consuming, and taking the film, developing it is expensive. The cost of the film is expensive. So yeah, they've got it made now. They've got it made. It's so much easier. It's so much easier, and they can do anything they want.
On the plus side, if Warner Brothers ever does decide to put out a Blu-ray for Superboy, as unlikely as it might seem at the moment,
oh no way!
At least it was shot in HD. At least they could do it if they wanted to. They just,
I mean, who's got DVD players anymore? I think I kept one in my house just for nostalgia. I have one in the basement, but who's got them? I stream everything.
I know Chris and I are both physical media guys, just purely because with streaming, your internet goes down. That's it.
Right.
It's just that's a pain. The streaming services, they're delisting things all the time. I don't even know if you can find Superboy anywhere. Like, I have to have my DVDs because it's pretty much the only way to watch it.
Oh, I can tell you for sure it's around, because I just got a residual check that was a European residual check.
Oh, fantastic. I wonder what streaming service that's on. I might have to look into that.
I don't know.
It's good that you're still getting residual checks after all these years.
Every once in a while, you get a surprise, like, blast in the mail a little bit,
That's nice.
When you're doing the show, the residuals are significant, but now they're a lot less,
Yeah. It's a shame. I mean, I think I caught the show for the first time about 8 years after it had aired. It was being repeated on Sky. So yeah, it's funny. I saw that show around the same time as Lois and Clark, and it was mostly season 3 I was seeing at the time. And
do you watching Lois and Clark and my show kind of the same time?
Concurrently, yeah, I was watching them both at the same time. I think Smallville started like a year or 2 after that, so it was like, yeah.
So you were bombarded with all these shows.
Absolutely, it's why I'm such a massive nerd right now.
But
of course, we know what your favorite. We know your favorite was, right? So.
Oh yeah.
Don't tell me.
Yeah,
you don't have to say.
I don't mind saying Lois and Clark did many things very, very well, but stuff like flying, or even just playing, how Superman should be acting. I don't know. I think Superboy had it all over Lois and Clark.
Good.
I really do.
Nice. I wasn't
especially
looking for
the flying.
A compliment, actually, really.
But no, the flying is genuinely a lot better on your show because you've got that great team behind you. So yeah,
that's for sure.
you wrote a couple of episodes of the show. Obviously, we've already touched on Wish for Armageddon, but you also wrote Cat and Mouse, which is one of the 2 clip shows that aired back to back in season 4.
Right.
Do you know why there were 2 clip shows that season?
It's
and why
about
did
money.
they need the second one? Cat and Mouse
About
was
money.
better.
It's about money.
It's just
You know,
money.
it's basically they're super cheap to film. Like Cat and Mouse, we did it in like 3 days, if I remember correctly, and it was done in one set, and it was just clips. And basically, it's all about money. It's basically doing catch up. So you have X amount of budget for the end of the year, and at the end of the year, they go, "Oh shit, we don't have enough money to pay for the last 2 episodes. Let's do you called it a clip show. Let's do a clip show."
Yeah. It's just always been funny to us, just purely because it's literally they air back to back. So for 2 weeks, anyone watching the show was just seeing clips from older episodes.
Right.
And the second of the 2 includes clips from an episode that hadn't even aired yet from later in the season, which is really
that's so
weird.
interesting. That's interesting.
So how much do you know how much of seasons 3 and 4 was reshuffled after the fact? Because we theorized some episodes from season 3 should have been in 4 because you've got the new suit with the royal blue.
3 and 4, but 3 and 4 were the same suit. We only had the older suit, which is over there. If I can turn this, see over there, the green one.
That one, yeah.
That
through the end of season 3, you've got the royal blue suit, but it's definitely the lighter one early on. And there's a really great touch in the episode where you play not just Superboy, but also Vic the impersonator.
Yeah.
And there's a brilliant little clue, and I assume this was a flourish of the director, but you're wearing the season 2 and 3 suit when you first see Vic. But then when he gets his new suit that the military has made for him at the end of the episode, now he's wearing the royal blue one. And I just thought that was a really interesting touch. I wonder, was that even conscious?
I don't even remember that. I don't even remember that. I'd have to rewatch that. So you're saying that the 2 of us wore different colored suits?
Yeah, when you were Vic early on in the episode, you're wearing the season 2 and 3 suit.
During the kissing booth scenes.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
The kissing booth.
Yeah.
And and then later in the episode, Vic gets a new suit, and Superboy's got a line about like the military has good tailors.
Wow.
Yeah, then he's wearing the royal blue one.
I didn't remember
it's a little touch that it's a touch that we appreciated.
Didn't
Fascinating.
remember that. Wow.
Okay. Obviously you became a producer in the 3rd and 4th seasons, like writing a few episodes.
It was nice. I was a producer, and it was like, a lot of times when you're shooting something, they give anybody like executive producer credit, and that usually means absolutely nothing, right? Because they don't do anything, but they say, I want to be called an executive producer. But they actually let me do things that were fun. I mean, I got to sit in on casting, when my schedule permitted. I got to sit in on casting sessions and choose the actors that were going to be in the show. And that was fascinating to see how actors are chosen. I mean, I remember on one occasion, there was a woman who read for something. We had several women who were all really good come in to read. I'll say 5. And I would say 3 of them nailed it. And 2 of them, I think, were blonde. And one of them was brunette. And we literally picked the brunette because she was if we picked a blonde, the scene was going to be a blonde girl, another character, and then Stacy Heidick, who is like a reddish, and then in there too. So they wanted to like just mix it up a little bit. So they threw a dark-haired girl just in the middle just to kind of change it up because all of them were good. So it made me think, you can't ever, as an actor, you can't ever think badly about yourself necessarily if you don't get a job, because it could be the most random of things why you don't get a job.
Yeah.
And that's what's so tough about being an actor,
A lot of the time you don't ever hear what it is you did wrong.
No, they don't usually tell you, oh yeah, it was because we didn't like his hair color or something
such
ridiculous.
Such a silly
right?
thing. But yeah, it's funny because even on Lois and Clark, they replaced the guy that played Jimmy Olsen after the first season because apparently the producers thought that he looked too much like Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher, and they were worried that the audience would think he was their
it's their
son.
child or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But literally, Michael Landis told me himself that's the reason they told him, which is, his response was just, surely he looked like that when they hired him.
My God, that's
He'd
crazy.
worked on the show for a year. But, oh well, I guess
nuts.
that's just Hollywood, isn't it? Sometimes it's just stupidest reasons.
That's nuts. That's nuts.
Are there any actors that you would have loved to get on as a guest star?
You know what? I've never been asked that, and I never thought of that. But if I really sat down and thought about it, I would say, yeah. I mean, I was so excited that they brought back the original Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane from the Superman shows from the 60s and 50s, 50s. It was super fun working for them. So that was like a dream working with those guys. And she was so nice. And she told me, "You're my favorite Superman of all the Superman." And I said, wow, I was like on cloud nine when she told me that. Even if it wasn't true, then she just said it to be nice. But it was so nice that she said it. And Jack Larson, who played Jimmy Olsen, what an amazing guy. And he and I I would remain friends with both of them after the show and saw them socially and stuff. And they were just amazing people. But it would have been nice, and I just wasn't thinking along those lines back then, to like really say, yeah, I'm going to take a really proactive, approach here and try to get all these actors in that I would love to work with. But I just wasn't thinking along those lines back then. It's a shame. I mean, I just was playing along. But I mean, that's what Ilya was doing. Ilya was bringing in all these people that he knew and that he liked. And I thought that was a cool thing. I mean, some of these actors a couple of them I never heard of. And, it was nice to kind of bring these people back from the past. I mean, the cruelest thing about the film business is that they don't kind of respect many people as they go through life. It's almost like old doesn't exist. There's this incredible ageism in the business. If you were a professional in any field, if you're a doctor, a lawyer, when you get gray hair, people look at you more as more of an expert, and you get paid more, and the whole dynamic changes. When you're getting older in the film business, it's like the floor falls out and nobody wants to deal with you. And it's really sad. And it's worse for women. And I feel badly for women because, women are looked at so objectively. Like, if she's not young and beautiful, we don't want her anymore. But think of like the really amazing actresses. And I mean, there are a couple of British actresses that just defy this, like Judi Dench and people like that, right? They defy all that. But generally, these wonderful actresses who are female, it's like you don't hear from them once they hit 40, 45. They're gone.
Yeah. I forget who said it. I saw an interview with an actress. It might have even been Judi Dench. And she literally said, you can be young and pretty, and then as soon as you hit middle age, nobody wants you. But as soon as you reach past a certain point, they want you again because suddenly they need.
Well, they do want her. They do want her.
Yeah.
But I don't see like an explosion of like all these older ladies or guys working. I just don't see it. It's almost like they don't exist. It's almost like the television and film world makes it look like, older people don't exist anymore.
Which is silly because, as you said,
they do.
Yeah, as you said, like as you get older, you turn great. If you're a doctor or something, they just assume that's experience.
Right.
How many hospital shows are there?
And
on
you're paid
TV?
more for it, and you're more in demand, right?
Yeah, but
if
every
you're going to see a doctor, you're going to
TV,
want to know how many of these surgeries have you done. How many, I want to go to the person that has the experience, the hands-on.
Yeah,
Right.
you don't want to go.
There are some actors that are like really good at this, like Tom Cruise. He's a little bit younger than me, but man, he's holding on. He's very incredibly talented. He's got a huge production company. He controls his whole environment. And man, I see him working. I see him working for forever. I mean, he'll be like, falling out of a wheelchair and doing that kind of a scene if he has to at some point.
Mission
But
Impossible
you can't keep him down, but that's so unusual, right? So unusual.
Yeah. I can't think of anyone else that quite does it like he does.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still doing. I mean, these stunts that he's doing. Some
Yeah,
of
it's
them are
nuts.
just.
No, it's
It,
nuts.
you couldn't pay me enough to do some of those stunts,
Right.
But I
But
don't know.
when you
He does
look
it
at some of
because
your
he's
favorite
the one making
actors,
those decisions.
yeah. But when you look at some of your favorite actors, some of the shows that you watched, it's hard to see, but a lot of them just gradually just fizzle out. I mean, from some of your favorite shows, from when
Yeah.
you were younger and stuff. Think of the actors who were in it. I don't know if you ever watched Friends or this or that that's popular. The people just disappear over time.
Yeah. Like a
And
couple of them are still working, but I mean, I can't think of the last time I saw like Matt LeBlanc in anything or.
right. George
Yeah.
Clooney came from one of those shows. He was on one of those
ER was it?
ER shows. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was in a little acting class that I did years ago too, where we used to have this acting class, like an informal class that was run by this guy, and people just used to show up. It wasn't formal. You paid like every day to come in, and everybody would read scenes. And I remember George sitting in the front. He was really kind of quiet. Nobody thought, yeah, he's going to hit it really big. But
I'm
there you
sure they
go.
didn't think that.
Yeah, there you
After
go. You never
Batman and
know.
Robin, I mean, George Clooney has gone on record calling himself the worst Batman of all time, and yeah, there's a story where he met Adam West at a convention, and he apologized for his portrayal of Batman, and Adam West's reaction was simply, "Well, it didn't harm your career, none did it," and that was
Yeah,
it.
right. Yeah, right.
It's like, well,
True that.
he's
That's
done
for
pretty
sure.
well for himself, hasn't he?
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah, obviously we're talking more and more about producing the show and stuff like this. You wrote 2 episodes. Was
Right.
there did you ever have an idea for like a third episode, or maybe
I
even something
did.
for the tie-in comics?
I did, and they would have given me more, I think, if I had the time, because they really like when they said, when you're writing something, then they say, "All right, now we need it." So you have to be like writing. So I'd have like, and this is like 1989, 90, 91. I had like one of the first like laptop computers. It was an HP. It was like this fat, and I used to have. I think I have pictures somewhere of like me in my Superman costume, and I'm like writing
I
as I'm,
think I've seen
waiting to
a
shoot.
photo of you doing that, and you're sitting
Maybe,
next to a werewolf in it.
maybe, maybe.
Yeah,
But
something like that.
so it's just keeping the deadline while you're working is really tough. I would have loved to have written more. As a matter of fact, DC also gave me um, a comic book that they wanted me to read to write. And when they give you that, they give you a whole package, and it's like almost like a bible of their comic books that you have to follow, and they give you kind of like a path to follow. And they gave this to me, and they were like saying, "So when are you going to give us? When are you going to deliver the comic book? When are you going to deliver the comic book? When are you going to deliver this?" And finally, they just said, like, forget it, and they just dropped it. And I never did the comic book, which really bothers me to this day, that I didn't take that seriously and do it. I mean, the money was like nothing, but it just would have been really fun to have written a comic book. I
Yeah,
should have I should have maybe just taken one of the stories that I wrote, like Wish for Armageddon or something, or something that
adapted
I
it.
could have
Yeah,
serialized a little bit so that I could write more of them. I was
that
just
would have
not,
been
I
fun.
wasn't thinking.
That would have
I
been
might have
fun.
just been having too much fun doing something else.
I mean, Wish for Armageddon was just such a great episode. Anyway, do you like when you wrote that villain character? I apologize for forgetting the character's name. I'm sure Chris can tell me
Garrett
though.
Waters.
There we go. When you were writing that character, were you familiar with the comic book villain of Vandal Savage? Because there are a lot of
No,
similarities.
not
No,
at all. Not at all.
that's interesting
Huh.
because there's a
No,
lot of similarities there. We often refer to it as the not Vandal Savage episode,
huh.
and we love it for that reason.
So you're talking about the guy who was like this demonic kind of character, almost?
He was a caveman and he was immortal in the comics, and
Not a
yeah,
caveman. He wasn't a caveman.
Vandal Savage was.
Garrett
Rick
Waters.
Savage was.
He was kind of like a torturer during the Inquisition. The way
Yes.
I
Right.
saw it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I took his character from, there's a biblical character allegedly, and I'm not a Bible scholar, but allegedly, like one of the Roman soldiers or something that scourged Jesus or something was
Oh yeah.
condemned to stay on the earth for all time or something like that. I don't know if that's true story or if it's legend or blah blah blah. But I had just heard of that, and I said, "Oh, interesting premise. Somebody has to, the world has to end before they kind of are released from their misery of like living forever.
Hmm.
If you can imagine, that's a misery, right? Which I guess it could potentially be." Um, and I said,
That's a
"That's an
really
interesting
interesting
premise."
approach. Yeah, it's a great approach to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit? I mean, I know you said you did have an idea for a comic or a third episode. Would you tell us a little bit about what that story was? Like, even just basic
You know what? I,
summary?
I hate to disappoint, but I really don't remember. I
Ah,
don't even remember. It's been a long time. I don't
fair enough.
remember. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
it's one of those things. If I didn't ask, I would have regretted it. Um,
But I
Season
promise you, it
two.
would have been something like he's on the global scene. He's like doing something big
Mm,
because that's where my mind was at. That's what I wanted to be writing. Um, the challenge was like always like, okay, how do you do that, but make it fit in our budget? So when I wrote, Wish for Armageddon, the scenes that, he was working in, like in the beginning, there was a scene of these Russian soldiers in this like radar room. That was a kind of easy scene to do. Then there was a pipeline that the Superman character kind of sabotages, and that was easy to do. Um, so they didn't have to be like outdoor things where we go on location somewhere. They were kind
mm,
of easy to do, and I had that in mind. So the other episode, if I had written one, would have been similar. He would have been doing something like on the worldwide scene, like, and being like what my idea of a real Superman would be. What would he be doing in the world today?
mm.
And
That's,
that was what I was always pushing for. But again, budget, budget, budget. You're always dealing with
mm,
budget. And other people have really good ideas. Not all the good ideas are mine, that's for sure. And the miracle of like working on a show like that is when you write a script, it's like really anything that's written. You can get a good script, but there are so many talented people that bring so much more to it.
Right.
You let this costumers look at, what they're going to do, and then you look at the set designers and what they're going to do, and then you look at like the music people and what they're going to do, and I mean it just creates this new thing, and then what you wrote might have been much more limited, and this thing just expands in such an amazing way. And that's the really incredible thing that's kind of unique to the film business. If you write a book, you've got to spell it all out, and that's what people are reading, and that's what they're conjuring in their mind. But when you write a screenplay, you're writing something, you're giving some direction, you're giving some description of your exteriors and what's happening and where you are and da da da. But sometimes the descriptions, as you've probably seen from scripts, right, they're simple, boom, like a line.
mm.
But then the art department gets a hold of that and they go, wham, we're gonna design all this stuff. I have a book that's in the front of my movie theater room here that is like the artwork from my show. The guys who were in the art department put it together and they gave it to me, and it's
Wow.
basically all their drawings from all the sets, all their set drawings, and it's fascinating because you see like the creativity of people is pretty amazing, right?
You should
Yeah.
share some of that stuff on Instagram. I'm sure there's a bunch of fans who'd love to see that stuff. I know I
Really,
would.
really,
Yeah.
on Instagram. I mean, my feeling
Oh,
of
wherever.
Instagram is that what people like to see is like you're drunk at a party or something. They want to see a video
Yeah.
and see something fun like that. It seems like no matter who the actor is, the likes that you get like are 10 times or 20 times or more higher if you put a video up.
Yeah.
And I'm horrible about doing Instagram because I never know what to put up. It's not like first thing in my mind to say,
Mm.
oh, let me throw something on Instagram. I
Well,
don't know if
take
people
it
want to
from
see.
me.
Yeah.
If you ever just take a screen, like just a photo of a page from that book every now and then, I guarantee there are people that will lose their minds over it.
Hmm.
Seriously.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And you got two of them right here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I
Um,
can count on 2 people watching it and liking it. That's good.
yeah. Maybe just us. So did you ever was there ever a chance that you could have ended up directing an episode of the show? Because obviously you
Interesting,
produced, you wrote.
interesting, interesting that you said that. You may have heard. I don't know if you've heard, but my contract the last year had a directing component to it.
Huh.
So I was supposed to direct an episode, and then what they asked me is they changed it from an episode of our show to an episode of some other show that they were going to do. Now, they ended up paying me for it, but no show was ever done. So I think it was a little underhanded business by the producer who negotiated that, who was a lady on the show. And I think she just did it to make me go away because I asked for a producer, to produce, excuse me, to direct an episode. And I had studied directing, and when you're on a show that long, you can kind of direct it in your sleep because the cameras,
how
the
it works.
lenses, the cuts, what they're looking for. It in some ways, and I don't mean this in an egotistical sense. I mean, anybody that's working on a show for a long time, you get to know it so well. And if your mind is in the place that you want to direct, and I studied a little directing, it's not hard. It's like, the shots that you got to do. And, if I were directing it too, I'd have a real vested interest in moving it along, making it happen fast, making it efficient. I want to show them, hey, man, I can do this. Look at this. So I'm going to get off my ass and I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to work fast. And, I just don't think that the producer who negotiated that with my agent, negotiated in good faith.
That's a
My
shame.
feeling is that she knew that, she wanted to appease me, but she wasn't going to let me direct an episode and made up this other BS show that didn't exist.
Right.
That's a shame. I mean,
Now,
I guess you did still
They
get
paid me, but I wasn't looking to be paid. I was looking to
You
create a
wanted to work.
different avenue for my career.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ah, man, that's a shame.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I guess you did still get to put some influence in. I mean, this is just a rumor, but I've heard that your version of Clark Kent in season 2 was very different to what you actually wanted to do. Like, we've always heard that season 3 and 4 was more what you wanted to do in the first place, but
yeah. Well,
how much of Clark was,
you can only
especially season 2? How much of that was the Salkinds?
a lot. When you can only play what's written, and you can play what's they're directing you. If the thing is very comedic, and they're kind of making the character like a goofball, that's what you got to play. So there was a lot of like that physical comedy, and he was just
Clark was a little bit odd in season 2, wasn't he?
yeah, he was, but that's the way they were writing it. And you look at the characters that we had, like Mixus Pitalik and all this other stuff, who are all these odd characters from the comic books, and that's what they wanted. He was a guy in college, and he was kind of a little bit of a misfit. He was a geek, and it just kind of lent itself to being that way, or at least his cover story was that he was a geek, and that's kind of what I had to play. And Ilya was eating it up. He loved it. He loved it because he felt like it was what Christopher Reeve was doing, like the more goofy kind of thing with pushing his glasses up and all that time and all the time. And
I mean, we know Ilya Salkind was big into the humorous side of the character. I mean, Superman 3, you can see how much humor has been injected. I mean, they hired Richard Pryor for that movie. They didn't get him to do anything particularly funny, but the effort was made.
Right.
Yeah, and Ilya Salkind, he did the story on the episode Johnny Casanova, which is just an outright comedy. That episode with Mark Holton. Can you tell us a little bit about that episode actually before we move on? Because Mark Holton was great.
So what do I remember about that?
I know that Mark Jones worked with Mark Holton again on the Leprechaun films, just purely because of Superboy. So,
really?
Yeah. But that's all I know really about that episode.
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything specifically you want to know? Because I don't remember that much about it that I can say, wow, I remember that. I remember it being an odd, different episode,
Yeah, it's not the best episode.
It was kind of an episode that was like, what was the character with, what was that movie? And it was redone. It was with Jerry Lewis originally, where he takes a potion.
The Nutty Professor.
Was it the Nutty Professor?
Yep.
Yeah, and
Where
then
he
Eddie
becomes this
Murphy
very
played it later.
suave guy, and it
Buddy
was kind
Love,
of
yeah.
fashioned after that, wasn't it? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Very much. It was
Because
that
didn't he
with a
take a
little bit
potion
of,
also, and then he became
yeah.
Johnny
It was
Casanova?
basically the same thing, you know.
It was the same thing.
Superboy had a knack for every now and then they would look at a popular film and say, "Let's do our version." And
Right.
there's some great episodes that came from that. You know, there's about 3 Terminator inspired episodes across the show. Lois and Clark did it too. Smallville did it way more. But I
Really?
guess it's just a function of the genre, I guess. Like Smallville was doing their version of everything. Like they had an episode that was based on the Hangover movies. Like it was very
Well, that
odd.
show was on for a long time. They had to keep keep inventing things to do, right?
10 years. 10 years, you know.
I mean, wow, that's crazy. That is
I
crazy.
wish Superboy had lasted that long, I can tell you, because Lois and Clark just got worse and worse as it went on. Was Superboy, you could argue, got better. You know,
Yeah, I think
it's one of those
that
things.
is true. I think our show did get better over time. I think it did.
Yeah, I mean, seasons 3 and 4 are just some of the best Superman television ever made, as far as I'm concerned.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a good friend who she's like a big Superman fan, and she and I are pretty close friends. And one day she told me that I wasn't her favorite Superman. I was her second favorite Superman. Close, she said, really close, but that she likes Corn Sweat. How do you say his name? The guy that's on the show now. The guy that's on the
David
show now.
Corenswet, yeah.
Yeah.
His movie's not out yet, but from everything I've seen, he looks like he's doing a good job. I know.
Yeah. That's what I hear.
Yeah.
So I have this like running joke with her. So now she's my number 2 or my number 3 fan. So I keep demoting her whenever she tells me something like that, which is fun. It's fun to do. Got to get them back.
Yeah. Seasons 3 and 4, you know, they it really did improve in pretty much every regard. I think writing, directing, even just simple things like lighting.
Well, there was a big revamp because if you remember back in the day, because it sounds like you're a Batman fan too, you know, the Batman movie came out and it was very dark. You know, the way it was photographed was very dramatic for the time, right? And I used to complain all the time in my season 2 of the show that, you know, Superboy was like helping grannies across the street and he'd fly and land in some, you know, land on the street there in some intersection and he looked like a Christmas tree. I said, he's lit up like a Christmas tree. His suit is bright. I said, this is not cool. I said, we got to change this. So then thank God that movie came out and then people started talking about, yeah, we got to, you know, give the show like a little bit of a darker feel. And that's when it happened. And it really kind of turned the tide for the last 2 seasons of the show.
I mean, they changed the entire setting, didn't they? It's practically a soft reboot of the entire show, as far as I'm concerned. Like, it's very, very...
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, it's very similar in terms of the lighting to the 1990 Flash series with John Wesley Shipp. Chris and I have always theorized that perhaps they could be set in the same universe. They just never refer to each other. But just because visually they look so similar, you easily could have crossed over if you wanted to. I don't think any of the fans would have.
Well, because producers don't coordinate and they don't think of doing things like that. It
never would have happened.
Unfortunately, right? Unfortunately.
One thing I've noticed, about seasons 3 and 4 is there's a lot more character-driven stories in it. I mean, especially Cat and Mouse, very character-driven. Rebirth, the 2-parter where you thought you had killed somebody. I mean, just that scene at the dinner table with the Kents, where you're telling them, oh, I could go here and do this, but then there's a fire here and I can't do this.
He's complaining. Yeah.
It's almost like you're almost having a nervous breakdown about the things that you have to do and need to do, but can't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was like one of the most real moments, I think, of the whole show, where he expresses his frustration about what the expectations are of him and what he can physically do and what he could possibly do. And then I don't know if you would say the moral complication or implication of what he's doing, but the frustration about his limitations and what he wants to do and what people expect him to do and what he can do. So that was like a very real moment that I think it was almost like, well, he's not a teenager, but it was almost like him breaking out in this bitching session where he just needs to vent, and he goes to see his parents and he vents. And I think it was like, who can he talk to, right? Who could he have said that to? There's
They're
nobody
pretty
else
much
he
the
could have
only
said it
ones.
to.
You certainly can't tell it to Lana at this point.
Right,
She
right.
hasn't found out yet.
Right.
And there's a great scene a little bit later on in that. I think I don't know if it's in part 2 or maybe the end of part 1, but you're out on the field and Mark Kent tells you the story about when Jonathan went off to war. She didn't know she could love someone that had taken her life. And it's just this really real moment. And it's one of the best scenes in the show.
Right.
Seasons 3 and 4 had a lot more of that stuff. Like, how much of that was a conscious decision, or is it that just you knew that that's what was working, so they went with it?
I think it was a conscious decision to go that way, and consequently, it was working. And then we just continued it. It was a very conscious decision. The writing got more, right on. Everything just kind of everybody got on the same page.
I think that's just how it is with all genre shows, isn't it? I mean, you look at any season of Star Trek, the first couple years of The Next Generation, as much as people love that show, those first 2 years are pretty bad at times. With these shows, it always takes a little while to find the footing, like see what works, which direction it should go. Superboy found their direction sooner than most, I would say, in the genre. Sometimes it's by the end of season 3 before they really find their footing. You had it from episode 1 of season 3, so
well, people on our show wouldn't necessarily agree with you. I think some people thought that the season 1 was a disaster and the show was going to be canceled. The season 2 didn't look right.
It was an improvement, but maybe just not enough of one,
Right. And then the last 2 seasons were like, okay, we found our stride. That's why it was so, like it was a big ouch when they pulled the plug on a show.
Yeah. Because, I mean, let's face it, any show that gets cancelled, you expect it got cancelled because either the viewership dropped off or just the quality in general of the show declined. Neither of which was an issue with Superboy,
No,
you clearly
it was
still
all
had
other
stories.
stuff. It was other stuff.
Yeah. Plus, you had a bunch of writers on the show that wrote for the comics. So if anyone knows how to keep a show going, it would be them.
Yeah,
Because
right.
that's literally all they do. I know Michael Carlin in an interview a few years ago with Kevin Smith said that writing for comics is all second act. You can't, because every issue is somebody's first issue. Like, it all has to stand. It's all second act because you can't really conclude all the story points because then where do you go next week?
Right.
So if anybody would understand how to keep a show going for another year, I'm pretty sure Michael Carlin and Andrew Helfer and J.M. DeMatteis, some great writers that worked on your show.
Interestingly, I asked Michael from he's not with them anymore, from DC, Michael, what's
Carlin?
his name? Yes. I asked him, I said, you guys offered me to write a comic book. I said, if there's any way you can, talk to the people that are there now and let me write it, I'd love to do that. He said, I'll see what I can do. I'll talk to them, but I never heard back. So I assumed it was like something he didn't do or didn't get a good response. But that was one thing I did regret, that I didn't find the time to write that comic book. That would have been fun.
Yeah, I mean, we would have loved to have read it. We've got every issue of the tie-in comics. Something which Lois and Clark never got. They had a couple of romance novels, didn't they?
Yeah.
I think they had some trading cards, but I mean, even Lois and Clark didn't have much in the way of merchandising.
Interesting.
Yeah. You had it all over Lois and Clark in terms of the comics, They had one comic book that they released, but it was just old stories that inspired the show rather than anything that was set in their world.
Huh. I wonder if they just had a lousy marketing department, or I don't know what, or merchandising.
I don't know. It's odd. You would think that a show, I mean, according to DC, Lois and Clark was a huge, huge deal for them. You would have thought they'd have done a little bit more merchandising.
Right.
At the very least, you'd think they would have released a T-shirt or something with Dean Kane's version of the S. But
right.
There you go.
I mean, but what are they doing now with like the present like CW show that's going to be finishing soon?
That
Are they
right now
are they selling stuff with that or no?
The only thing they've recently done was they did a one-shot comic that's set in the universe, but that's about it.
And
Yeah,
no action figures, nothing like that.
Nothing
no,
yet.
nothing yet.
Well, there you
I
go.
mean,
So
you can
this is
buy
like
posters and stuff, but I mean, yeah.
maybe
I
they
mean,
just figure that there's not enough viewers or something, and they figure, okay, how many of these things are going to sell? Because I guess
yeah.
for them to do something like that, they want to sell millions, and maybe they just don't think that it's going to people viewers of the show are going to translate into people that are going to go into a store and say, okay, I'm going to get this figure of this guy for my son or something, or my daughter, so they don't do it, you know.
I think it probably doesn't help that the universe that the show is based around was pretty much on its last legs when the show started. So yeah, a lot of fans were already done with that section of the DC universe when it actually
Really?
started. So yeah, the viewership hasn't been great, but it's genuinely a really
The
fantastic
viewership hasn't
interpretation.
been great for the show on CW.
No, not that well. I mean,
Are you
that's why it's
sure?
ending now. Yeah, they've reduced the episode count for the final season. They've slashed the budget in like half.
How
Just
many episodes did they do? Do you know?
It was
usually 10.
13 for seasons 1, 13 season 2, 13 for season 3, and I think they went to 14 for season 4, but they slashed the budget with removing characters from the
So
show.
around
Yeah,
50 something episodes.
yeah, something like
Something
that.
like that, yeah.
Yeah, Superboy had
Wow.
100. You know, it's one of those things that whenever we try to get people to watch Superboy, and they're like, "Well, how long did it last?" And like, it lasted 4 years. Like that's exactly as long as Lois and Clark lasted.
So
But
you know
people
what? You've been
remember
asking me
one.
a lot of questions. I got a question for you guys.
Okay.
I don't know how old you are, but what is your connection to this show versus other shows? I mean, what's your connection? Is
You
it
want to go
something that
first,
you
Tom, or you want me
watched
to go first?
when you were a kid? Did you sit down with your dad or your mom and watch the show, and it kind of like just hit you when you were like at the right age or something, or was it, because I mean, I hear so many stories about like why somebody watched a show and really engages it. And obviously you guys are really into this stuff because you have a podcast, right? So
Yep.
you have more than like a passing interest in the show.
Yeah, I mean, I might as well just because my story's rather short. I'll just say it now. I mean, I used to watch it. It was repeated on, I think it was on Sky One in the UK, but they always seemed to air it at random times. Like it was very difficult to even find the show. And I mean, I remember seeing Mindscape twice, and then I hadn't seen the majority of the rest of the show. Just for some reason, that's the episode that they decided to air more than once. And then years later, I end up finding bootlegs of the entire show.
Oh,
And yeah,
that's so frustrating to hear that they
yeah,
just didn't have it on, you know. I
and
know that.
that's I think though that's what sparked my imagination with it, because I was like, what is this? And like as I saw more and more of it, I think another episode I saw was one of the Bizarro ones from season, like it was either season 3 or 4. I forget which episode it actually
I
was.
mean,
I think
what age were you at the time when you were watching this?
12, 13, maybe something like that. And it was
Yeah.
only on like really late at night. Like it would be on like 11 p.m. at night. So I would
Right. Oh
set
my
the video
God.
going
Oh
and
my
set the
God.
timer. Yeah, it was a nightmare. But thankfully I managed to get all 4 seasons on bootleg for I think £25, which was a damn good deal at that time.
So
Yeah.
Sky One put it on there just as like filler before people go to bed.
Pretty much. I think they used to air it straight after X-Files, which
Oh my
was
God.
I get why they would pair it with X-Files,
Yeah,
especially
me
in
too.
seasons
Me
3 and
too.
4. Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. Before that, I mean, I was already into Superman. I'd been watching like Lois and Clark, the Christopher Reeve movies, some of the animated stuff.
Right.
So by the time I found Superboy, I was like, well, one, how have I never heard of this show? And two,
Right.
how is this better than Lois and Clark?
Wow.
And yeah, it just went from there, really.
Yeah.
Chris, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm a little different than Tom. I was actually watching this when it was first airing.
Well,
I was
you're US based, right?
Yes.
So it was probably really easily accessible for you.
Yeah. What happened was, I had just started high school when when season 1 aired. And my grandmother lived upstairs in our house. And, I would on Saturday mornings, I'd go up there and I'd spend time with her. And we were flipping through the channels one day, and there was one of the season 1 episodes, and I was like hooked from that moment. And, because I was a comic book nerd at that time, going to high school, that was my one thing that got me through getting beat up every day in the halls.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Times were a lot less kind back then to nerds, wasn't it?
Yes.
Superhero media has only become like pop culture, let's face it, in the last 10, 15 years, hasn't it?
And I liked John when I first saw him, and then when they made that announcement that you were taking over, I was like what most fans would be doing on the internet now. I was like complaining. And then the first episode I saw you, and I was like, oh wow, he's better. And you and even Douglas with his portrayal of Bizarro got me through 4 years of hell.
Wow.
And it's got to help as well that the new Lex Luthor was also better, because I don't know if you've gone back and seen any of season 1 at this point, but season 1's
I never did.
Lex,
I've not seen one of them.
Yeah, the Lex Luthor in season 1 is legitimately maybe the worst actor I've ever seen in my life. Like I don't know.
I mean, my thinking was
one of those ones you can see.
My thinking was this guy got fired, and I've heard, out in the grapevine that he claims that he was fired because of contract discussions and all this stuff, but that's not true. He was fired for one reason only, and that's because the ratings of the show were like tanking. And my first day there, my very first day, I was just costumed, just ready to go on the set. They're just about ready to like put me out there. And Ilya Salkin calls down to the set, and he has me sent up to his office. So I went up to his office, which was like his little lair, which was so cool. He had like acoustic tile on his wall, like the acoustic, the thick acoustic stuff to absorb any sound. So when you spoke in his office, your voice disappeared. It like you knew not a syllable was leaking outside of these walls. So it was like a very secretive place. It was like he was a spy.
So I've always heard that Ilya Salkind was a bit of an odd man, but
just a little eccentric. So I was standing in front of his desk in my costume, and I felt like I was in the military, and I'm talking to my general there, and he's giving me orders. So he said, I just want to let you know, he said, we have a lot of faith in you. However, the last season was going to end the show because our ratings were so bad. He said, the ratings must come up. He said, if they don't come up right away, we're going to cancel the show. And 120 people or whatever he said, we're going to be out of work. He says, I'm sorry to put all that pressure on you, but feel pressured. So I just gave him a big smile and I said, no problem. We'll do this. And then I walked out of his office and had some fun. I figured, there's nothing I can do. It's sink or swim. I got to jump in the deep end and just do it and have fun. And that's what I did.
And, it was an improvement. Clark in season 1 is very similar to Clark in seasons 3 and 4. But I imagine that the more comedic direction that Clark was given in season 2 must have been a good jumping on point for a lot of fans, because let's face it, comedy is universal. If you can get someone to watch an episode and they crack a smile, they're probably going to tune in again next week. And there are episodes in season 2 that I flat out think should have been a sitcom, like the Mrs. Pitlick episode with Richard Keel as Bilkerbok. That is an episode that I'm convinced that if you added a laugh track to it, it would be the funniest episit of the show.
I mean, what? I never read.
You did do that.
I did do that. It didn't quite work. But, if it was being done while they were directing the show, you could have paused for the audience's laughter and all of that. But, It was a silly video. Little things like when Andy walks in, I'd add like the studio audience going claps and all of that, like the big sitcom entrance. But the comedy I imagine brought a lot of viewers in. So as much as I prefer season 3 and 4 for Clark Kent, I can completely see why they did what they did, and
Hey,
clearly it
that's
worked.
the way they wanted me to do it. It wasn't really so much my choice.
Obviously, in seasons 3 and 4, when you did have more of a choice, that's when
more
things
fun. It was more fun. But you know what? I don't regret it because it was nice to have that transition, you know?
Oh yeah, and it's fun because as a fan, you can even look at it as, you know, Clark is figuring out his secret identity still at this point.
Yeah.
He's still young. He's not quite got it. Maybe he will
Exactly.
end up like Christopher Reeve, but at the moment, he's not quite reached it. You know, he's still a little bit. Yeah,
Exactly.
so it's
He's
ton of
figuring it
fun.
out. He's developing himself as he goes. And, you know, as you know, you were talking about that scene with Salome Jens and with the Mon Pa Kent. He's figuring himself out the whole time. He's like not quite a teenager. He's a little older, but he's still like having these growing pains of like, what does the world expect of me? What am I going to do? How do I do this? This is too much for me sometimes, because you think of it, he's got superpowers, but in a sense, he doesn't have a super psyche. He doesn't have a super mind in that regard, that he's like impervious to doubt and into, you know, or depression or things that are going to, you know, hurt
Yeah.
him, you know, psychologically, you know.
It's often been said that Superman's perhaps the most human superhero, which is really ironic considering he's not at all human. But
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of who he is, he's definitely a man raised by humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was ordained that I was going to get that job. I remember this joke. When I was younger, I went to see some guy, some friend of mine dragged me to go with him to see some guy who does past life, what do they call it?
Oh
Regeneration or
yeah.
whatever. And he does his thing with me, his little voodoo. I don't know if it was hypnosis or what he tries to do. But he told me that I was an alien that came from another planet, and he went through my whole life. And, you know, the last, you know, 100 years ago, you were lived in the UK and you were a boxer and you were all this other stuff. So for me, it was kind of a little bit fun to like, you know, just put that all together and say, yeah, you know, this guy told me I was an alien. I came here
He
from
was
another
kind of right.
planet,
Yeah.
and there you go. So I finally got cast. I got cast the right way.
Yeah. I'm very conscious of the time. We've kept you for well over an hour at this point. I want to let Chris ask one more question, and then I'll close us out with one last question,
Sure,
just
sure,
so we can save some stuff, so that if you're on the show again in the future, we still have some stuff to ask.
sure.
Gerard, my question is this. Recently, you know, in the last few years, you know, before Adam West passed away, they did those animated movies where he and Burt Ward and Julie Newmar came back to basically do a follow-up to the original 66 series. If Warner Brothers came to you today and said, hey, we want you to come back for an animated film, you know, you do the voice of Superboy, maybe you transition into Superman, would you be down for that?
Oh yeah, of course I would. Of course I would. Why not? It would be fun. It'd be
Do you
so
have
fun.
any?
I can start doing all this stuff that we're talking about, right? And really having fun with it. You see, the nice thing is, after your career is kind of moved on and stuff, you don't give a shit anymore. It's like you could do whatever the hell you want. You just that's the luxury of it. It's like, I don't need the business anymore. So it's like, if I were lucky enough to get a job, it's all fun. It's all fun. There's no pressure, and you can really be more creative in some ways. That's why when you see some people that come back and their career starts again after many years, sometimes you go like, damn, I didn't realize they were so good, right? It's because they have a different perspective on it, you know? I
Probably
mean,
a
you
little
remember
bit
John
less
Travolta?
nervous
I don't know if you were old enough to know when John Travolta didn't work for many years, and then
than
he
Quentin
came back and it was
Tarantino.
like boom. It
Yeah.
was like boom. And that
And
just happens sometimes, you know, with actors. I can name a couple other actors that happened too, but
I mean,
you know,
Quentin Tarantino, he's famous for doing
yes,
that with a whole bunch of people. I mean, it worked for
yes,
Travolta, you know, it's worked.
yes.
He keeps casting just legends that he loves their work.
You know,
I
when I was
mean,
working on the show, I forgot what season it was. John Travolta came to the set asking to be put in the show.
Really?
why wasn't he put
Yes.
in it? That
I
just
don't
seems like a
know.
no-brainer.
I wasn't there. He came to, when we were working at a Universal. It was a day that I was like working on set the whole time, and he showed up there, and allegedly he asked to be put in it. And that was his period, when he wasn't working. He went through this period of time where I remember he did his last movie, and then he didn't work for several years.
Mm.
Hollywood just wasn't biting. And then, Hollywood woke up and said, hey, we got this great talent here. Let's use him again.
Yeah.
And clearly, the people on my show who he met with were not smart enough to say, hey, this is a great opportunity here.
It really is. I mean,
imagine him playing Lex Luthor or something, or being a bad guy.
That would be fun. I mean, just off the top of my head, he's a very accomplished dancer. I would just invent a supervillain whose power is like, I don't know, he makes people dance until they die of exhaustion or something.
Right.
That could have been an interesting fight. That's just off the top of my head. I'm sure it'd be better by the time a script was written.
Or just imagine, the episode Out of Luck with him as Mr. Lucky.
That would be fun. That would be fun. It's just, I guess it's just one of those things, isn't it?
Mm.
It would have been fun to get John Travolta involved in the show.
Yeah.
Is there? We've already asked you if anybody else. I guess that's an answer to the question from earlier about which guest star would you have brought on if you. Well,
that would have been amazing. I actually read for John Travolta, and I forgot the director's name. He was doing a movie, and I remember he auditioned. They were doing auditions at the Plaza Hotel in New York, and I was just a jerk. And I showed up they told me the room number I had to show up to at what time. So I got there, and I remember specifically the shirt I was wearing. It was like this very cool flannel shirt, this cool pattern that you don't usually see. It was done by this designer that I had modeled for a couple of years earlier. Right. And I ring the bell or whatever, knocked on the door of the hotel room, and the door swings open, and John Travolta's like leaning against the door, and he goes, "Hi, I'm John Travolta." I go, "I know." And I kind of like walked past him or something. It's like, I was like such a jerk. I was like, come on, give this guy respect, and be like, wow, you're John Travolta. And I didn't do any of that stuff. And I read from he complimented me on my shirt, and I said, well, if you give me the job, the shirt's yours. And I remember reading for him and the director. I didn't get the job. I forgot the name of the movie, but I remember that the movie was a total bomb, and it was the movie he did before his career tanked. It was like the last one.
Battlefield Earth, was it?
No, it was the last one he did, and then his career tanked.
Okay.
It wasn't, John Travolta is a great actor. It's his career tanked because it was a crap movie, because it was a crap script.
Yeah.
John Travolta, you can't make diamonds out of garbage. It's like you need a good script to like show yourself, right? And John Travolta is a great actor. But unfortunately, that movie didn't do well. So I never felt too badly about not getting that job. But he came roaring back, right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's John Travolta he's one of these great actors. Tarantino brings back a lot of people, but just on a nerdy note, his most recent film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there's a character in it who's a movie director or shooting a spaghetti western, and it's Nicholas Hammond, who was Spider-Man in the 70s. And
oh, really?
I can't remember the last time I saw Nicholas Hammond in anything.
Yeah.
And now you see him in this movie. He's got the 70s haircut, great big sideburns, like the red sunglasses. And
well, that's because he lives in Australia now, Tom, and he does a lot of Australian soaps.
Oh, no kidding.
Is that why?
Right.
Oh, fair enough. But it's always nice when an actor.
So I remember I was at my gym one day. This is like 20 years ago. And I'm sitting there, and John Travolta comes and he sits right next to me. And I go, "Hey, John, how you doing?" And he's very friendly to everybody. He's like big smile. He goes, "Hey, how you doing?" But I said, "John, you don't remember me, but I read for you." And I named the name of the movie. He goes, "Really?" He goes, "Holy crap." And he goes, What was the character?" I told him. And he said, "Holy crap, you look young." And at the time, he was like just kind of transitioning into like his bald look and stuff like that. And he was so freaking nice to me. And I was thinking, you're so nice now. Why don't you give me the job then, buddy? But he was so gracious, and it was so good to see him at my gym. But it was like I saw him there that one day. He never came back.
Yeah.
We used to get
Yeah.
celebrities that would just pop in, pop out, pop in, pop out.
I suppose that must happen more and more these days. As soon as
Yeah,
they get,
right.
as soon as word gets out that so and so works out here, suddenly you're not
Yeah,
going
I
to be
guess
left
they have
alone.
personal trainers and they go to their house. But if you want a ton of equipment and stuff, you got to go to a big gym. You just
Yeah.
have to. But so do you guys have any more questions? Chris, you gave me a question. Tom, did you have one
Let's
more
end
that you
with
said or no?
one last question. Trying to pick a good one now.
Did you write these down? Because I don't even see you looking down at like notes at all.
I've got it just in a separate window on the computer screen. So
Okay,
yeah.
good job.
So yeah, season 4 basically ended with Lana learning Clark's secret. And,
Right.
Multiple times.
Yeah, although she kind of learnt it before.
She sticks me with a pin or something, right?
Yeah, she stabbed you in the butt with a sewing needle or something.
That was pretty fun.
Yeah. What do you think would have happened on, like, because that happens and he's literally about to get in the car with her and they're driving back to Capital City. That must have been a long car journey. Like, what do you think they discussed?
That would have been a great scene right there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been. Like,
That
I
would
mean,
have
you
been
could
the
do a whole
cool opening
episode
scene
just
to
that.
the next season, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could literally set the entire episode just in that car.
That
Just
would
a
have been
conversation, just like,
that
what
would have
about
been fantastic.
It would have been a good clip show, even. You can.
Oh, forget a clip show. I mean, that you could drag that out. You could do a great scene in that car, and then move on and then you'd have to he'd have to make her swear to secrecy, blah blah blah, and then somewhere along the way he'd have to transition and say, give her the news. I got a job. I'm going to be moving to Capital City and da 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 da, and we'll stay in touch and we'll be friends. But isn't that interesting though? They never in the Superman movies or shows, to my knowledge, ever show his old friend Lana Lang.
No, Lana showed up in one episode of Lois and Clark.
Oh, there you go.
And that was it. But
Yeah,
she was a Lana
So they
in a
did that.
parallel universe episode. It was a Roads Not Taken type thing. We never actually saw Dean Kane's actual Lana.
That seems to me an opportunity that they missed. When he's that close to this woman that he liked so much, he loved her. And then he loves somebody else later when he's older, but they still were so close. Why wouldn't he maintain some kind of a friendship with her? Or
just basic love triangle drama. It'd be interesting, especially for a TV series and stuff where you actually have the chance to expand that out.
Because Superman 2, the whole character is more guy driven. I mean, if you put the romance in it a little bit more, it would have, I think, drawn a lot of more women into it too, which is nice.
Yeah. I mean,
I love having guy
Lois
fans,
and Clark
but it's always nice having female fans too,
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of why Lois and Clark was so successful, because they were very much writing to a half female audience as well. Because,
right.
I mean, let's face it was just a romantic comedy a lot of the time. So, yeah, it's a good idea that I'm surprised Superboy didn't touch on a little bit more.
I never really thought of that until you kind of brought me down that road. It's interesting.
Do you think there's any particular incident from the show that you think Lana would be particularly pissed off about, knowing the truth now? Because there's been quite a few lies that Clark has had to tell her over the years.
Oh, well, it's going to be like the story of anybody that lies to somebody over a long period of time. I mean, she would perhaps understand why he did it, right? But she's going to feel like, hey, you never brought me into this. You never trusted me. All that stuff would be coming up, and he just have to lay on her that, hey, I did it to keep you safe. I did it because, I love you and I wanted to keep you safe, and I didn't want people coming after you, but I also did it because I had to. I couldn't, put you in a position where you had this burden. He said, I could just see the scene. I live with the burden. I didn't want to put the burden on you, right?
Yeah.
So that could be great scenes, and that could have been a great episode where he has that, personal interaction with her and says that. I mean, that would be very powerful, and that would be such a great character-driven, episode.
I can imagine Lana's response to that as well would be like, yeah, well, supervillains kidnap me every other week. How much protecting do you think is actually
That's exactly
happening?
what I was thinking, Tom.
You know, let's face it, there's every episode, like there's the episode with Darla, and it's like something has gone wrong. Lex is trapped in a parallel world, and she's like, so I
Right.
just do what Lex always does, kidnap Lana.
Right.
And that's
right,
literally
right. No, you've got a point
So,
there. So
yeah,
they
so
have it.
I
It
can
would have
just,
been a really active conversation, right?
yeah, it would have been a lot of fun.
Would have been a
I
real
imagine
spirited
Lana would have been
conversation.
more than a little bit pissed off, and maybe quite rightly. I think she could have been trusted a little bit sooner.
Right.
But yeah, that's
But I
basically
think
it.
there'd be a point, like some relief too. Like when you feel like, I don't know if it's something you can relate to, but you're right after all these, like somebody's telling you you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, and then at the end of the day, you're right. You were right the
Yeah.
whole time. It's like catching somebody and say, you've been telling me this is the way it is all this time, and now I know it's different. And you've been telling me I'm wrong, or I'm a liar, or I'm this, or I'm that, and now all of a sudden the tables are turned. That's pretty powerful.
Mm.
You
It
know,
would have been a really, I think, the first episode of season 5, if that's the stuff that it was based around initially, especially since he's about to move to Metropolis and presumably meet Lois Lane and all of this.
right?
There's just so much potential there for drama. I think it would have been a lot of fun.
Sounds
It's a
like you
shame
should
it
have been
didn't happen.
producing.
I mean, it's I don't know.
When you were
When
when you were 12 years old, we should have gotten you off the couch in your grandma's apartment upstairs.
That was
and
me. That was
flown
me.
you, okay, and we should have flown your ass out to Florida and had you produce the show
Well,
with all these
Michael
great
Carlin,
ideas.
I know that Mike Carlin does watch our channel from time to time because he's left us some nice comments in the past. You could still hire me. I would work very cheap. But,
Well, I think he's retired now. I think he's retired.
Yeah, I don't think he's in charge of the animation department anymore. But for quite a few years, he was literally running all of the DC animated movies. Like that would have been the time to do it, I guess. But
Big John. Oh,
there
well.
we are. What can we do? I do want to save some questions for if we have you on again, like in the future with Douglas and all of that.
No, that'd be great. No,
yeah.
You definitely got to snag Douglas. I'd love to do this with him. He's a great guy.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken to Douglas in the past, but he was so much fun. Like, we're happy to have him on anytime.
No, he's a cool guy. Great guy.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Well, guys, thank you so much. This was fun. And you know what? I love where this went. I mean, you went down so many different roads that nobody usually, I mean, people usually don't kind of ask me the stuff were asking me. It kind of went in different directions, which was kind of cool.
Nerds.
Since they never gave you an action figure, I made one.
Yeah, he made an action figure of you.
You did that yourself? No.
Well, I took existing parts and put them together, and I found the head that looks the most like you back then.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I've got a 6-foot one back there.
Oh yeah, you got one of the custom Hot Toys up there. Oh, and an actual full size one. Yep. It's funny. I've heard a story that you've told in the past that you actually had a mannequin head made of your likeness at one point.
When I was a younger guy, before I was acting, I was a model, and 2 companies separately made mannequins out of me, and that's one of them.
Wow,
that's cool.
In my closet downstairs, I have the torso of another one, and I put hats on it.
That's cool. I mean, it's got to be interesting having a mannequin of yourself.
I think I'm the only Superman that's ever had a mannequin of him, so it makes it easy for me to costume this guy.
You'd think the Superman Museum would take advantage of that, you know?
Yeah,
just put a mannequin of you in the museum. That would be cool.
That'd be cool.
Wearing one of the original outfits. But there we go. Thank you again.
Hey guys, thank you so much. This was a great time.
Yeah, we had a really great time.
Hey, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
We didn't expect to go quite this long, I don't think.
Well, I owe it to you, man. I was late 15 minutes. I mean, come on, I owe it to you.
Nah, we
thanks for being so patient. Thanks for being so patient.
And
I was at the gym and I was like, not like, I wasn't like thinking of the time.
No, it's fine. Thank you all so much for watching.
All right.
We'll see you.
My pleasure, and I hope your audience likes it.
I'm
Take
sure
care.
They will.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Viacom.